Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Colin and Patricia show. This is Dog Speak Live, and today we have the lovely Toni Shelbourne who's come to talk to us about a huge topic, a topic that most people would like to understand, and it's about resource guarding. Why do dogs actually feel the need emotionally to want to keep hold of something, and in some cases, let you know about it? And when they let us know about it by the growl, I'll let Toni pick up from there. But let me introduce our today's guest. Toni has worked with domesticated and wild canids since 1989 after a successful career with the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association. Toni started her own business as a Tellington T-Touch companion animal practitioner in 2000. After being one of their first people to qualify here in the UK. Now, over 3 decades later, as a T-Touch companion animal instructor and animal behaviourist, Toni has written and teaches several applied T-Touch courses available through online learning platform. Toni works with clients locally and teaches nationwide and internationally. Toni is also a referring behaviourist for the Oxfordshire Animal Sanctuary, where her skills in T-Touch and behaviour are invaluable for helping the traumatised animals find themselves in the sanctuary's care. She is the author and co-author of 8 books and writes regularly for Your Dog magazine and Your Cat magazine here in the UK. Toni lives in South Oxfordshire here in the UK, England. Wow. Oh, let me get my breath back. Wow. That is a lovely bio, Toni.
Thank you.
That is really impressive. The one thing that's not on there that I would love to have seen is the wolves.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you that want to know more about Toni will be able to tell you at the end of this chat how you can reach her. Toni, okay, so let's kick off with today's topic. Resource guarding. What is it? Why do dogs do it? What can we do as the humans to prevent it, if that's possible? Do we need to find out more about genetics, epigenetics? There are so many things that I think that can be confusing to a dog owner, and I'm a dog owner as well as everything else. Even me sometimes with your own dogs, you think, oh. So over to you, Toni.
So first of all, I think we need to understand that resource guarding is actually a natural behaviour. You know, we all do it. We look back to the pandemic. What did we do? We all resource guarded loo roll and soap. You know, the things that we think are vital to our life and our survival, we want to hold. You know, we want to keep those safe. So when we come to dogs, you think about things that dogs resource guard, and the list is huge, right? Isn't it? So we've got food, toys, beds, whether that's our bed or their bed, sofas. It could be a person, it could be an area, it could be a smell. You know, there's so many things that they think they need, and they need to protect that because that helps them in life, that keeps them safe, or that, you know, that they perceive that they really need that. It's a resource that they need to survive, right? Mm. So when we look at that and we think about how that happens, you know, why they think that way, there's lots of different reasons why dogs do resource guard. Obviously, there is that predisposed likelihood that they will hold on or become resource guarders. So you think about the breeds that are bred and have been bred for many, many years to pick something up and hold it. So you think about your gun dog types. You know, how many Cocker Spaniels do we see and Cockapoos that we see that resource guard? Because that's what they are having bred to do, right? They are genetically predisposed to pick them up and hold them. I once had somebody say to me, yes, but then to give them back, right? And I was like, no, that's the bit you have to train. So yeah, they are likely to pick it up, hold it, and want to keep hold of that. So that's one reason. So obviously genetics is a big play, but any dog can resource guard, right? It can be anything. And we think about Chihuahuas, for example, resource guard people all the time. You know, their people are their world to them. They're going to let anyone come near them. I'm not just picking on Chihuahuas. You know, we know any breed can be able to do this behavior. For some dogs, it may be that we've created that issue, just how we've managed it, you know, as owners of little puppies or dogs that have come to us and from rescue, and we behave in a way that the dogs then go, oh, actually that item is either more value to me, or I'm really, you're taking it off me in a way that is too confrontational. So we set that up. But it could also be that the dogs are feeling vulnerable. So we know that dogs who are in pain will be more likely to be resource guarding something. You know, it might be that they feel really comfortable in an area. You know, dogs can resource guard patches of sunlight, you know, because it's a lovely place to be and they don't want anyone else to be there. So there's so many reasons why dogs do this behavior. It could even be that as a puppy, they've been a street dog, you know, they've had to fight for their food, or even the breeders just fed the puppies out of one big bowl and they've had to, you know, really kind of compete for that food from their litter mates. So there's just so many reasons why it can start, right?
You just hit on something that is, you know, for me, in my opinion, which is probably one of the biggest reasons, not the only reason. It comes back down to the breeders element. When when they're in their litters, when we look at those very small plates, and the strongest and the fittest survive, and they get there first, and then they're all over the top. You know, the rest of the litters, you know, the litter are clambering over the top and struggling. Um, I'm not sure if there's anything scientifically that would actually support the fact that, is it the ones that struggle to get the food more that are more likely to resource guard?
Wow, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any resource for that. But if you are hungry because you're not getting enough food, you're more likely to fight for that food, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do we, how does a client, how does a dog owner, get to notice when a dog is probably in the early stages of resource guarding? Because resource guarding isn't just something that comes straight at you, dog styling teeth and growling. There are other predictors that can tell us that, hey, look, this guy here is a bit stiff when he's eating his food, and you know the way he's looking at you, the way he moves. You know, if we can sort of educate people from the very early onset, yeah, the things to look out for, yeah, that would go a long way, I would imagine, to people understanding their dogs more, respecting their dogs more, giving them more space, and good management
Yeah.
around stuff. I mean, what can you sort of explain some of those signs to look out for? What, you know?
Yeah, sure. And of course, you know, we want to prevent this from starting ever. So the best way for us to do is manage our behavior. But when we're looking at the dogs, we're looking for those little tiny micro little signs. So like you were saying, freezing a little bit, sort of standing over with the head lowered, maybe a little bit of white of the eye, what we call, us trainers called whale eye. It could be that they just start to lift their lip a little bit. You know, you see the whiskers and the lips just moving a bit. There might be a little soft growl. But if we listen to those real whispers, like you say, those first little signs before they do actually get to the point where they growl or snap or charge at us, or you know, in the worst case scenario, bite us. And let's face it, we've all seen dogs in our profession where people have been bitten really badly, right? So yeah, it's looking for those breath rate changes, those eye expression changes, those little stillnesses that they'll have, that little hover over the item or the area that they really want you to go to, that little kind of moving in front of you if there's an area that they want, or, you know, a bed that they want to, you know, be theirs and only theirs. So yeah, lots of little signs, and looking for those little ones are obviously really important. But you know, so many people do miss those because there's so much more education that needs to go on about dog communication, isn't there? Most of my clients that I see, when I say to them, oh, so tell me, do you know anything about calming signals, for example? And they're like, no, don't know that. Yeah, they've owned dogs for years. And you think, wow, how have they been able to have a mutually understandable relationship between them and this other species without knowing those tiny little signs? So I think the more we can put the information out about calming signals, about breath rate change, eye change, which we do a lot of in T-Touch, with the Tellington T-Touch training method, we're always looking at those little whispers. That's going to really help people just to know when to change their behavior around their dog. Because, you don't want to get into conflict with these dogs, right? Because that's just going to make it completely worse. And people say, oh, well, no, I've got to take that item off them. I've got to, they've been told from traditional times, oh, take the bowl away when the dog's eating, because that'll teach them not to resource guard. If my husband tries to take chocolate off me, he knows he's going to be in big trouble, right?
I get that. Anyone that knows me, when Colin is eating, they will clear. Yeah. Even the dogs, look at me and think, no, that's not a good idea. We do project this way with our body language, even if we're not doing it on purpose, that we are enjoying what we have, and the aura around us don't come close. I totally get that. And I think, people do need to be more educated about managing their dogs, being able to have that management. If you're going to give a dog a bone, and your dog is more likely to be protective of this bone, let's give him his little space. Let's give him that space. We don't have to go over there. He can just gnaw on that bone to his heart's content. And when we're finished with it, we will clearly know. People do miss these signs. And yeah, if we go back to, oh, blimey, I'm 61, so let's go back 40 years ago, probably a bit more than that, where people would take things from dogs. The heavy-handedness would come into play, and dogs would be more likely to be more fearful of those people. Yeah. But as we now come to today, we've evolved a little bit more since then. If we look at what happens today, and puppies get chased around the room, they have things taken. Puppy gets picked up and something gets taken out of the puppy's mouth. People say, oh, puppy thinks it's a game. Well, I don't think it's a game. The growl, people are not taking the heed, warning of the growl. Now, talking about growling, what does growling and resource guarding go together?
Well, it's just an escalation, right? Because they've not been listened to. So they've gone from those little subtle signs, and then they're like, well, that didn't work. So actually, you're really quite threatening now. You're coming at me, you're forcing my mouth open, you're grabbing something that I really need or want, or an area, or turfing me off somewhere that I'm really comfortable. And don't forget the pain aspect. How many dogs have been, mislabeled as dominant because they're been in the park, being rolled over by their mate or tripped over and slipped. They're sore, and then you grab them by the collar and move them, and they growl at you, and suddenly they're a resource guard or they're dominant. So we really need to think about how we are perceived to them. The minute we start, and I understand, if a puppy has picked up something that someone perceives is dangerous to that puppy and that might hurt them, everybody's instinct is to rush over and grab it, right? And that's human instinct. You want to protect your puppy. But how does that look to the puppy? It looks like you're just really threatening and really scary. In dog language, you haven't managed that in a way that's going to demote conflict. You're promoting that conflict, right? So even if a puppy has got something that's fairly dangerous for me, I'm more likely to run away and be really interested in something else and grab some really lovely food and scatter it on the floor. How many puppies go, oh, they've got something a bit more interesting than me. I'm going to drop this item here and go to see what mum or dad's got over there. And that's the way to deal with it, right? We don't want to be dealing with it with conflict and grabbing things and chasing them around. We're never going to win. They're faster than us. Their teeth are sharper than us. it's only going to end badly. So the first thing I always say to clients if they have a resource guarder is tidy up. If they can't practice the behavior, that's going to start to diminish anyway, right? And it's going to keep everyone safe. And how many clients do we go to where the house is just full of stuff that the puppy or the resource guarding adult dog can grab hold of every single day, all day long? And it can be tough. And it might be that we don't have to kind of just use barriers to, section off areas of the house to keep the dog in a safe area that they can't pick anything up. It might be about us just being more mindful about where we put stuff. And for puppies, it's so important that we clear up anyway, isn't it? There's so many things that are dangerous for a puppy, to start chewing cables or grabbing the remote control and the batteries fall out and all of that stuff. But how hard is it to tidy up,
Toni, can we talk about socks?
Yes.
Yeah, you're both laughing because don't you? Please explain why the socks are probably one of the most main things that get guarded from dogs.
Well, they smell of us, right? Yeah, they're lovely, they're soft, they're easy to pick up. We drop them all, especially if we've got children, there's always socks everywhere, right? Everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's such an easy thing for the puppies to get hold of or dogs to get hold of. But that enticing, it smells of us. So if they're really connected to us, they're more likely to pick it up. I used to, years ago, one of my dogs when I was at Guide Dogs, I used to have to go off and do kennel stuff in the morning. He'd stay in my room when I lived in. I'd come home and he'd always have got my hairbrush and put it beside him because it smelled of me. So I'm assuming that's one of the reasons why they do it. I mean, you guys might have some other ideas about that as well, but lovely little soft little things, easy to pick up, smell of.
I think it's one of those things that's, like you say, always lying around. And as the human, we say, no, I don't want you to have that. So then quite early on, we chase the dog. And then the puppy learns that the socks are really high value. And one thing I often like to ask my clients is, does your dog resource guard its toys or its food bowl? And a lot of the time the answer is no. And that's because we're not chasing them around for those things. So the socks tends to be quite high up the list, and also tissues.
Yeah.
Where we just need to leave the dogs alone, don't we? Like you say, go and do something else, show an interest in something else, and we're not going to be placing value onto those items.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that you can have a resource guarder that is so resource, one thing, like you say, socks, but other things couldn't care less about. And it's the same with food, isn't it? Sometimes you say, well, do they resource guard the food in the bowl? And they go, no, but they'll resource guard a treat that they've fallen on the floor because we rush to go and grab a piece of food that we've dropped off the counter or they've nicked off a counter or something. So yeah, it's contextual as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Patricia, that is, the shock didn't even enter my mind. And until you actually mentioned it, yeah, most people I work with, it's either socks, tissues, and Toni said it, the remote control. Yeah. And they're the things we place a hell of a lot of value on. Yeah. And when we take our socks off, we put them down, just leave them there. Dog goes and pays interest. We add more value to go and take it away. Yeah. The remote control is probably one of the more things we add value to because it's always in your hand or always close by, always being touched. Yeah, we're more likely to be shooing the dog away from the remote control. Yet, shoo the dog away, but we still leave it there for them to have access to. Yeah. So you're right when it's about adding value to stuff because if I like to, work with my puppies and my dogs, and you don't add value to anything. If they take something to start running off with it, we just ignore them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just ignore them. So coming back to the chasing a puppy or a dog, because it's not just puppies that resource guard. Tend to find it's the older adolescent onward that tends to be more of the resource guarder than a young puppy. So would you suggest that chasing any dog, whether puppy or adolescent or older, for the item. Is that a good idea?
So what I always say to my clients is, it doesn't, I mean, a lot of them as puppies may chase, but then as they become resource guard, like you say, it becomes into adulthood, because as puppies, they kind of allow it, it gets done to them, but then they start to change their behavior as they come into adolescence, because they're like, actually, I don't want to be chased and have things grabbed off me anymore, so I'm going to fight back, right? But then what was the question again? I've lost my thread.
It's basically, it's chasing. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you more or less covered it. I mean, if a puppy or a dog has got an item or an object that we don't really want them to have, we go chasing my Bailey with that object. Is that a good idea? Or should I just, like I said, pay no attention, take no notice?
Yeah. And it's not just chasing, it's just the speed of how we move. Because we suddenly get we get anxious, don't we? And we start like getting up and moving towards the dog, or, say they move, we might chase them. But it's just the intensity of what we do as well. If I'm working with a resource guarding client and that dog happens to get something while I'm there, I'm like, wait, don't move, don't have an issue, don't look at the dog, don't think about it. I say, just get up, do something else, leave the room. They always follow you. They're like, where are you going? This used to be a game, or, hang on, I've got something I think you really want. But also like, oh, hang on, where are you going? Are you going somewhere a bit more interesting than what I've got here? And we diffuse it that way. I mean, you can set up resource guarding, as we all know, being professionals, with one bad reaction to our dogs or our puppies. So it's really important that, we can say to them as a puppy, if they're not a resource guarder, you're so clever, what have you got? Don't take the item off them, but give them a little fuss so they get used to you touching them without you having a reaction to them. And then, if the puppy drops it and maybe you've exchanged it for a lovely treat and it's not an item that's dangerous, give it back to them, right? So you start to do that object exchange. But most people, what they do is they get an item off a dog and then all the fun stops. And the puppies are like, or the dogs are like, oh, well, there's no reason to give this back then, because actually now mum and dad wander off again and I don't get that attention. I always say to my clients, after you successfully got a item off a dog, with using the appropriate methods like a drop or using Chirag Patel's brilliant counting game or whatever tool you're using, don't let the fun stop. I now have resource guard or ex-resource guarders who will actively go and pick items out of the washing basket and give them to their person, because they know that's rewarding for them now. Whereas that dog I'm thinking about, oh my goodness, when I started working with her, she was such a danger. She was biting, she was like guarding it. I mean, she'd literally go in your pocket and steal things out your pocket if you didn't zip them up. But now she loves giving things back because we've done it in that appropriate fun way, and we've never stopped that game when we've appropriately removed an item from her that she possibly shouldn't have because it might be dangerous for her.
It's a good way of dealing with it, because now you've got a dog who's quite happy to give something back, because you've worked with this dog constructively, positively, to be able to take something and bring it to you. Which then brings me on to looking at when we have dog puppies that are actually willingly wanting to give us something, we should be taken on board to give this dog an outlet, to be able to retrieve things, pick things up, or find things. So, do you agree with the breed specific analogy where we should, find the outlet for dogs like gun dogs, especially? And we know they like to have something to carry in their mouth. Yeah, a lot of dog owners don't understand this, so these dogs become bored, frustrated. They can't have that outlet to practice what they were bred to do, hold, carry. Yeah. Do you also agree that more education around outlets, giving dogs outlets, should happen more? Or?
Absolutely. We've for hundreds of years we've bred dogs to do a specific job, and now we're telling them they can't do it, right? I mean, I've had clients who've had Labradors who retrieve books off bookcases and take them to them because they're like, I really want a job and I haven't got that job. You know, there are so many, like, talking about the gun dog breeds, you know, there are so many pet gun dog training classes now where if you don't agree with shooting, that's fine, but the dog still needs that outlet. So you can go and have a fun gun dog training class, but not have to go and do the shooting bit. And that gives those dogs that outlet, but also gives the owners, their people, the way of being able to work with them in an appropriate way, right? And the dog then becomes more obedient and more, you know, adaptable and easier to live with as well. So, and I think the other thing that people do when they're trying to teach a retrieve with puppies, for example, is again, they try and take the item off them too quickly. So, you know, by setting up a mat on, you know, in between your legs, sitting on the floor, a lovely sort of little bed, and just chucking something away. And when the puppy brings it back, don't take it off them, just play with them, give them a big scratch and are like, oh, you're such a great puppy, and wait for that puppy to either naturally drop it or, you know, at least you're not taking it straight away. And how many times again do we end the fun before they are ready? You know, we just go, okay, let's just or classic example is playing tug. People go, oh, well, you have to win, you know, because we're told, you know, if we don't win, the dogs will be, you know, they'll be dominant and all this stuff, and you need to be the alpha dog. Well, oh, what a load of rubbish. You know, if I play with a dog and I win all the time, how demotivating is that? It's like if you play with children and you don't let them win, even when they're not very good at a game, they're not going to play that game with you again. So you want to be able to kind of just like, I always like will go, okay, might play a bit of tug, and then I purposely let them win. I run away from them and they go, this is so exciting, I'm going to come and play with you again. So they run up and they put the toy in your hand for another go, right? So I'm never taking it off them, but I'm creating that motivation of play and fairness and equal play. And you see that with dogs, don't you, when they play together with an item, if they're playing tug, you know, one often lets the other one win and then the other one re-engages with that toy. So it's about changing our natural instinct to just take things off dogs really quickly. Because we don't want to, and it's really demotivating and causes things like resource guarding.
Yeah. And like you say, much more common in certain breeds. I think, you know, for some dogs you can do that stuff and get away with it, you know, and that's just down to maybe the character of the dog, the breed of the dog. But for some dogs, if we snatch away when they're puppies, it's inevitable they're going to start resource guarding as they get older. You know, something I say to my clients is, you know, the way that you were with your puppy, you've probably done exactly the same thing that another person has done, but they've got a different breed of dog. And yesterday I was talking to a client and she felt really bad. She was like, I've caused this problem, you know, and to try to motivate her, I was like, look, don't be too hard on yourself. You've probably done what so many other people have done. It's just that your breed is more predisposed to this particular problem. It's just that they've been lucky.
Yeah.
I rarely see resource guarding terriers. The resource guarding dogs that I see are cockapoos, spaniels, French bulldogs, Labradors, maybe some cavapoos. I'd say that's it. Not seeing a lot of other breeds with resource guarding issues.
But you're right, isn't it? Because it's also down to temperament, because you can have a dog that has had the worst life ever, like a street dog that has been rehomed and has had to really struggle to survive, who would not resource guard anything. And you have a pampered pooch who's had the best of everything and is the worst resource guarder in the world.
Yeah.
And you know, and you're right, we do see very much specific breeds, but you know, you do also get any breed can do this, kind of like any people. And it was the same for us in lockdown, right? I did not resource guard. I went and got what I needed. I never run out of anything. But then you go to the shops and you see people with like 16 packets of loo roll. And it's just in their personality, right? But we're all humans.
Yes.
So
And if times get tough, you know, if we ran out of food, I guess any dog would start resource guarding eventually, wouldn't they? You know, if it became that scarce, if the resource became that scarce, then they probably would, yes, to survive.
It's natural behavior, right? We all do it.
Yeah.
And that is the thing we do have to remember. I always say to my clients, this is a natural behaviour. It's just that it's got out of control and it's now dangerous for you if you're being bitten.
So we sort of touched on it's a natural behaviour. We need more education, more common sense as well. You also mentioned in the beginning that if a dog's in pain, we know that if dogs are in pain, certain behaviours can come to the fore. So if a dog's in pain, what would your advice be? Or what would your advice be in the early stages where someone thinks, okay, this is happening, my dog won't allow me to sit on the sofa, or my dog won't allow me to go near their food bowl, or whatever it is. Would you suggest that they go and have a vet check?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for anything, we're looking at, is there an underlying cause for this behaviour coming out? Why are these emotions coming to the fore? I know, you know, some people will say to me, oh, you know, it's when I sit down next to my dog or I move on the sofa. And when you start to ask those probing questions, you know, I've had clients who go, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that my dog got knocked over by a car and his pelvis got broken. And you're like, okay, is the dog on any medication for that? And they're like, oh no, he's fine. I'm like, is he? You know, or is it that actually just by you moving, you're thinking it's resource guarding, but actually there's an underlying reason for that that is completely different. But the other aspect of that, of course, is that any of us who are in pain will be more grumpy. Our tolerance goes out the window, right? Or if we're having a really emotional bad time, you know, Colin, you and I last year didn't have great years. What happened to our tolerance levels? Plummeted, right? Yeah, because we couldn't cope with anything else. We were so emotionally overloaded with stuff that was going on. It's really hard to be a reasonable, nice, patient, you know, person who can deal with the whole world. We get grumpy.
You're absolutely right. I can say if I go back to 2016, which is probably the worst year of my life, where I lost both parents, I could say my behaviour and attitude has changed since then. So I apologise to anyone who I've been rude to, or because I've only realised in the last year or so now that, you know what, I've got to start thinking and moving ahead and changing. So I totally get the resource guarding bit, and I totally get when we're not completely mentally right, we can plummet. And going back to the medication, even if a dog is on medication for a specific illness, I'm of the opinion that if I've had a side that's been hit, struck, traumatized, even though I'm on my painkillers and what have you, I may still snap through memory that thinking or feeling of what happened in the past and what it felt like. So
Yeah.
I think it's important that we also take that into consideration with dogs before we label it as resource guarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really, you know, a good point to say, because in Tellington Touch we do a lot of observation, and we can very quickly find areas of the body where the dog doesn't want to be touched. And again, like you say, it can get mislabeled. I mean, I do a lot of, I mean, lots of behaviourists will send a client to the vets first. I like to see the dog myself, because I can often then write a letter to the vet and say, oh, actually, we noticed that the dog doesn't particularly like to be touched here, or doesn't weight bear very well on this leg. I'm not diagnosing, I'm just observing what I see in how the dog feels about being touched, or, you know, their emotions about where I touch them or how they move, which just helps with the vet to pinpoint. Otherwise, it's a bit like a needle in a haystack, right? But they, you know, we know from papers that have been done, you know, Daniel Mill's brilliant paper from a few years ago, where, you know, up to 82% of dogs and cats with behavioural issues is related to a pain in the body or discomfort. And it's really hard because there's no diagnosis for pain, is there? And I constantly get annoyed with people who, not people, but and I love vets, and I'm not slagging vets off at all. They have a really hard job. But the vet comes back and goes, oh no, there's nothing wrong with the dog. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, I've had to send people back several times before we've got a diagnosis, you know, and people have taken us seriously. And sometimes those people never get that. And then years later, I get an email going, you know, you were the only person who recognised my dog was in pain, and we found out years later. And how have that dog suffered all that time?
I've my own dog seen 3 vets. He was limping, seen 3 vets, said he's fine, and I knew that he wasn't. And I got a referral for a physiotherapist, and through the physiotherapist, she suspected arthritis, got a scan done. Actually, really horrendous arthritis going on. Some dogs are very stoical when they go to the vet. Some dogs are shut down. They've got adrenaline.
Yeah.
They freeze. So you can get a false negative at the vets as well. So if I'm still suspicious there might be something going on, I might refer to a physiotherapist, because I feel that they're much more equipped to diagnose, and they take a lot longer to do that diagnosis. Yeah. Whereas the vet, it's often just a quick move a few joints. No, I'm not getting a reaction. The dog is fine.
Yeah.
Well, some dogs are really stoical and they won't make a sound.
Well, absolutely. And that's what I send with a letter. I guys tell people, right, take in, you know, you can use the canine arthritis management pain form that you can get your clients to fill in, the Helsinki scale as well, video. I get them to take video, because like you say, you go in the vet and it's completely different. The dogs rush with adrenaline, which is an analgesic anyway, isn't it? And you've got 5-10 minutes, and that's it. So yeah, I mean, the amount of times I've sent people to either a McTimney chiropractor or a physio, but then sometimes don't you also find that the vets are reluctant to refer on?
Yes,
again,
I
really
do.
Heartbreaking.
I feel sometimes that may be either an ego thing or perhaps worry about liability. Maybe I've had to say to clients, see a different vet, register with a new vet, because the vets refuse to refer them on to a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. There's no harm in it. Even if the physiotherapist says there's nothing wrong with the dog, great, we know this is behavioural. Let's get to work. Absolutely. It's not a waste of money, is it? It's information, it's a diagnosis either way.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and it's there's some really great people out there who are really trying to change this. Think about Hannah Capon from Canine Arthritis Management, Kathy Murphy. You know, hopefully it's going to start changing, but it's slow. I think the vets do need to look at how they deal and with pain in general as well, and pain management. Anyway, we're sort of getting off the subject of resource guarding, aren't we? We could probably, you and I, Patricia, could go on about this for days, probably, about this pain thing.
That was quite interesting to the two of you, and I thought that was quite interesting, and importantly, that bit was covered. Because whilst he was talking about that, it then struck me, what about diet? How can diet have an impact on behaviour? And if we're saying that resource guarding is a natural behaviour, can diet have an impact on resource guarding?
Oh, absolutely. Because you think about all those dogs that are on the wrong diet and they are not absorbing what they need. So therefore they feel hungry. You get adolescents who are on a carb-free diet who get to the evening and they're really starving. I know if I try and cut carbs out of my diet, I spend the whole day thinking about food. But also if they've got an allergy, you know, an intolerance to a food, it affects the whole microbiome, doesn't it? Which affects how much serotonin's in the body, affects their behavior. You know, there's so much great stuff out there now about the microbiome in the gut, and there's lots of really good resources to sort that out as well. So you're right, it's really important. And how many clients do we see who've got their dogs on, you know, they're not the best food because they've either got, you know, limit on their finances, or they just aren't educated again. You know, I think the worst thing in the world that ever happened was complete kibble.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If we'd had that conversation a few years ago about kibble, I would have disagreed. But having met Patricia, I am now better educated and totally understand that, yeah, I agree. We need to think about what we inside our dogs can have, and in many cases does have an impact on their behaviour. But when we are looking at, before labelling things, a good vet check, possibly bloods taken, people like yourself, Tony, where you can, give a good assessment of what a dog is, their gait, their movement, where they feel pain, where they don't like to be touched, and stuff like that. And with all of that, and like Trisha said, let's referring on to other relevant people, so that when we get a definitive back, we can either say, okay, we're not going to do anything because we know this dog's got a diagnosis and they're working on the diagnosis, or everyone comes back and says, everything's okay from what we have done, and Patricia's right. Okay, so this is a behaviour we can look at and how we can tweak it and modify it and make it become more safe. That all makes sense, but I don't think we're all working together.
No, and actually, one point that I will say is a lot of resource guarders actually are really touch sensitive because they've often been grabbed and moved around.
Right.
Or it's because there's something else going on in the body. So you often find that these dogs who are resource guarding will also really struggle to be touched, struggle with equipment. They will, react when you just touch them rather than just take things out their mouths because they've had that negative effect or there's something going on in the body. So it does show up a lot in the body, and sometimes you have to be really careful with these dogs because they also just will not tolerate any kind of physical contact.
Don't quote me here, but it's not the first time I've heard that. And I'm not sure if it's Dr. Amber Batson that I heard it or somewhere else. And it was also, I believe it was Dr. Amber Batson who made me start thinking more about diet as well as resource guarders. Yeah, it wasn't something I put together. I know diet has an impact and can play a part on how we behave, but I just left it there. It started to open up more for me when I start looking at individual behaviours. Yeah. So, resource guarding, you're absolutely right. Diet, a lot of dogs don't like to be touched. They are sensitive to the touch. So, are they really resource guarding? They may have that object. Our intentions is the object. Dog's intentions, no, you're going to come near me and touch my leg. Yeah. So, we do need to be careful about labeling before we label. Anyway, Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure having you come speak with us today. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you for your services, how would they be able to find you?
Oh, the easiest thing in the world, you just use my name as my website. So tonishelbourne.co.uk and you'll find me.
Wow, that easy.
Yeah, that easy.
Oh, blimey. Why didn't I think of my website like that? Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. You know where to find Tony. Most of you that have followed myself and Patricia on Dog Speak will know where to find us. So until the next time, it's goodbye from myself and Patricia and Tony, and we will be back soon.